Hi friends, it's Sarah from Ruffles and Rainboots.com, and today I'm sharing a moss and mushroom forest gnome. Look how cute he is. If you'd like to make him with me, just boop, stick around. As always, please like this video so I know you're here crafting with me. So this is what we're going to be making today. He's rough, he's rugged, he's painted, he has cute little accessories and moss. If you've been around this channel, you know I moved and I found so much air dry clay that I needed to get busy making stuff with it. So I'm going to use a clay roller and just roll it out by hand, flapping it over itself, making sure it's all incorporated and not crusty. So now I'm going to need a base of some kind. You can use crumpled up foil, a cork, a pill bottle, whatever you have. And I'm just going to make it pretty thick. So you can have up to 1/4 of an inch thick. We're going to be wrapping it around this cord. So I'm going to cut off this little crusty bit here on the side, and then I'm just going to, oh, there you go. And then I'm just going to wrap it around the cork. So I'm going to give mine feet. You don't have to do this. You can build out on top of a little heart, wood cut out, and just cover that in clay if you want. But you can see this is really thick, and I'm just going to be pressing it down. I'm going to score it, and then I'm going to press these two pieces together just so it's nice and wrapped around. Now, I obviously cut it a little too big. But what I'm going to do is just make sure I have a little overhang down here at the bottom. We're going to be making the footbed by cutting a little square-ish shape, folding it over, and just like when you were in elementary school, how you made a heart by folding over a piece of paper, and you just cut it out with an X-Acto knife or a flat knife, whatever you want. Look how easy it is. Now, I made mine a little bit big, and I have no excuse for that other than I really can't judge size. Like I said, I wanted to use some of this air dry clay. I do have some of it that is actually impossible to use, which is the part that's on the edges that was already open. And so I'm just trying to use up these things so I don't have to throw anything away. So you can see here, I'm just going to be putting it down here. But before we do that, we do need a little bit of water. And I mean a little bit. Dip your finger in and then add it to the clay. The reason is we don't want to use a lot of water because it'll just start slipping around. And also, you don't need a lot. So no reason. It'll also extend the drying time. All right, so I had way too much clay there at the top for the hat. So I'm going to cut that off, but use it later. And then I'm just going to start filling this hat in with the clay that I have here. On the bottom, I'm going to make sure I have enough clay to cover over, that part's crusty, but I'm going to make sure I have enough clay to cover the bottom. And there, I'm just going to be pulling it down from the sides and just right to the center. There you go. And I've scored the feet already. I'm going to add a little bit of water, a tiny bit, and press this in. Now, I got asked a lot of questions on my last air dry clay about blending. You can use the knife. Like you can use your fingers, you can use a toothpick, which I'm a really big fan of actually, and you can use clay tools. All you need is just a tiny little bit of pressure to drag down the clay. I always recommend popping on a piece of wax paper or foil to let this dry. So we're going to be building that, just getting it ready. Now this is a clay tool with a little silicone tip that's flat, but it kind of bends a little bit. I'm using that here down at the base just to join the feet and the body. I have to cut off a little bit more of the hat excess clay here, but again, we're going to be using that in just a second. All I'm doing is just building out the middle so it's a solid piece and it won't bend or break. And then now I'm just going to curve it. So I'm going to roll it in between my hands and then curve it just because that's what I want. You can make any hat that you want. If you are going to make a curl, please put a piece of wire in there, maybe wrap it in some foil to make sure that it doesn't break off. Just giving it a nice little structure to adhere to. So you can see here, mine has a nice little bulbous back. I wanted like a little accent back there. And here I realized, yeah, those feet are a little bit too big for this guy. So I'm just going to cut it off and then use my hands to shape the feet. Just kind of smooth them out. Okay, so I have a theory for some amazing Christmas gnomes, but I need it to be tested until then. So I'm using a pair of needle nose pliers to make a pretty good size hole there in the top of the bent hat. And then I'm just going to use my fingers to sort of smooth everything out. I have a very rough gnome because this is going to be a forest gnome for me. But if you'd like, spend a lot more time. smoothing everything out. I made a little nose, but we're not ready to put it on yet because I'm going to cut off some columns over here, and these are going to be a very chunky beard for me. Now, I have in other videos shown you how to combine fur and clay in case you want to incorporate that mixed media, which is a really cool look. But I'm going to use a similar method in cutting a channel, and then I'm going to actually stick these little columns in upside down. Yeah, upside down, and then I'm going to bend them forward and blend them up in the top. So I think why I'm doing this is because I want to make sure that each of these chunky pieces gets a thorough blend, but also still looks individual. So I didn't want to blend them all together and lose that differentiation. But I do need them to be really solid, while this thing dries. All right, so now I've got two pieces on. These are two very chunky pieces, and now I'm just going to use any tool, a knife, a toothpick, or a clay tool to add some texture. You don't have to do this, obviously. You can make skinny ones. I have shared in the past a silicone clay gnome, which is really cool stuff, where you can make really intricate pieces and it will not break. But with air dried clay that is, a little crusty, I'm not taking that chance. So I'm just going to add quite a few pieces here for the base, make sure it's all smoothed out on all the edges. I'm going to be adding a mushroom, or no, I'm going to be adding a mustache, but you don't have to do that. To join the nose, I'm just going to score it on both pieces and then join them the same way we're joining everything else, with just a little bit of blending. Again, using my finger, using tools, whatever you'd like. To create the brim of the hat, I'm going to roll out a very large snake and then just hack it off in the back. But first, I'm going to score the two pieces of clay, and that way, even the nose, that way when I add a tiny little bit of water, this is going to better have a chance to better adhere. All right, so there you go. So technical. I'm just hacking it off right on the gnome. And then I'm going to blend those two pieces together. Here's what he looks like so far. You can add more beard, but I'm going to choose to add two little triangle pieces. Again, score a tiny little bit of water, and then I'm going to blend them together to adhere those, like squish them right under the nose. I love how easy these things are. I put on an Audible book and I just listen to novels while I do this. It's really relaxing. All right, so I'm going to repeat that with the other one, and here is what we have. He's cute, right? After he dries, he looks white, which is deceiving, but you can sand, but if you sand, use a mask, okay? Just, you don't want this stuff in your lungs. I, however, am not going to sand this guy because I want him rough. I'm going to make him a forest gnome, but you can do a bell, you can hang stuff from the hall. I don't want to limit your ideas. Dollar Tree has these really cool little wooden accents you can get. But I'm going to use these. I bought these mushrooms at a craft store in the paper crafting section. And I'm just going to hack those up. I'm going to use some cast offs from sheet moss. I told you I save everything that was in the bottom of the bag that I store my sheet moss in. But I will recommend, in order to get the most accurate colors, you do want to paint the clay white. It looks white until you put it next to white paint. I'm going to be painting my mushrooms a reddish color, so I'm going to be using white on all of those. And the undersides are going to be Mineral by Waverly. This is just a chalk paint. I'm also going to use that same color Mineral to paint the body and the shoes. And I'm using a paintbrush, but also to get in the little pieces between the clay, I used a toothpick. It's technically a party umbrella, but that's all I could find. Okay, so I'm going to do a second coat of that and then dry that as well before moving on. Okay, so I don't have a dark red paint, and this is like ruby red paint. It's very red, which is why I was second guessing myself, but I'm going to blend some colors to make it look a little bit more like I want. So I'm going to start with a red base on everything and then hit that with a heat gun to dry it because I hate waiting. And then I'm going to do a second coat of this red before I darken it up. Now I'm not paying too close attention to that brim and not getting any paint on it because we're just going to cover it up anyway. See? Lazy crafting at its finest. Okay, so now that the red is on, I'm actually going to take a little piece of this because I'm too lazy to get up and walk and get my paint palettes. I'm going to create a color for the nose, which is a mixture of red, white, and mineral. And that way I'm using the least amount of colors, right? I'm not going to add in another color. I'm using the least amount of colors so that everything coordinates. And that's a little paint trick. If you can blend your own colors using what you have already on your palette, it's a really cool thing. Couple coats of that, and then I'm just going to add on little white dots on the mushrooms with my toothpick slash party umbrella. Now I have no green that matches this paint or matches the moss, but it doesn't matter. All we need to do is create it so that it's a dark green color on the brim, because we're going to end up covering it all. Now, because I said I hated that bright red and didn't have anything darker, I'm going to take green and the red and make a sort of wash of almost purple. And that is going to be as well as I can get it dry brushed, and then I'm going to rub it in. It's going to make my bright, bright red paint look a little bit more aged, but still have that red. I like it. It's pretty textured because, again, I didn't sand. I did have to get my paint palette for the Mod Podge. So I normally love glossy lacquer and varnish, but for this guy I wanted something matte, and the only thing I had was Mod Podge matte. So I did a coat of that. Always start with your light colors first, do red last, just because it has a tendency to bleed. So once I have that on, I'm just going to do the same thing for my little mushrooms. And here is a really, fun part. I'm going to cut these at an angle so that they sit the way I want them to, and just using wire cutters. This was the easiest part. I was so worried about this part, but it was honestly the easiest. And now, tedious process of gluing on. But I will tell you, this is way easier than I thought it was going to be in order to get all this moss on. I'm not going to make you watch me painstakingly put this on. I didn't burn myself through this entire process, but do be careful because you're just dropping some moss on there. And we will hit this entire thing with a hot air gun so that we can make sure no glue strings are left over. I'm gluing on both of the mushrooms and adding a little bit of moss to them as well. So this mushroom is in the hole on the top, and then I'm just adding a little moss around it. And the second one's going to be placed on the side. I did have to hold that one in place until it dried. And then when it dried, I just added a little bit of moss around the foot, and I missed that entirely because I'm not a perfect crafter. I just like coming up with some ideas to share with you, and I hope you like them. So here I am hitting everything with that heat gun because I don't want any glue strings. And you can see this is him in the studio lighting. Really cool. There's a lot of texture. And here he is under natural light. What do you think? Do you like him? I actually really do. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Please like, share, and subscribe for more crafty fun.